In the 10 plus years of coaching football and running Victory Sports, I've seen pretty much every practice template and schedule out there. But the big question is, how do you implement these structures into your program and what's the best template to use? In this video, we're going to show you how to structure your entire week to best prepare your team. And at the end of this video, we're going to show you how you can improve your entire game planning process. So you're preparing for your first game. How should Monday look? We're going to treat this week as if we're going to play on Friday night. Now, many coaches will have Mondays as their walkthrough and install days. This means a mix of film, on-field work to mentally prepare their players for what's upcoming. But is this the best use of Monday's time? In our opinion, yes, but only if you do it right. Here's the best way we found out to structure Mondays. First, if possible, we recommend watching the film the day after the game if you just played a game on the previous Friday. This will allow you to have Monday to be a complete reset and fresh start for the week. Whatever happened last Fridays in the past, nobody needs to dwell on it and everyone can move forward and not have to think about what just happened. Next, we recommend starting in a lecture hall or a classroom where players can watch the upcoming opponent's film. There's got to be some visual involved. We require every player to have a notebook to enter the lecture hall. Think of this as the notebook being an admission ticket to get into the lecture hall. We typically go to the dollar store every year and we buy 50 to 75 notebooks for the kids and a bunch of pens because they're going to lose them. Now, why the notebook? Because you want to make sure that we're hitting all 5 phases of learning. The first way is visual. Of course, we're going to show them what they're actually going to be seeing on Friday night. The second way is auditory. So we're going to talk through the process and that way they understand exactly what we're thinking so they can be mini coaches on the field. The next is reading and writing. This is why we require notebooks because every kid's going to take notes differently. They're going to write it down how they best absorb it. Next is social learning. We're going to allow all players to ask questions during or even after the meeting. If a kid is shy and doesn't want to get made fun of by his peers, he's going to ask the question after. That way, there's always coaches available. The last part of the learning process is the kinesthetic piece of it. Most players learn by walking through the game plan for the week. Now, how do you best practice the kinesthetic part? We recommend having goals that you want to accomplish by the end of the day Monday. So for example, defensively, you want to make sure your players are able to identify their top formations and their top plays. Offensively, you'll want to ensure that your offensive line can identify the top 3 fronts and the quarterbacks and receivers can identify their top coverages. And every player knows how to run the adjustments or the new plays that you just installed. Now, we recommend you install all of these in the classroom and then practicing the looks on an up-tempo period on the field. Put the pressure on your players early. That way, when you transition to Tuesday and Wednesday, everything goes off without a hitch. Now, let's transition to Tuesday and Wednesday practices. These 2 days are crucial. Don't just look at these days as practices, but think of these days as test days and the most important days of the week. Mentally, as a coach, you'll want to spend the most time on these days. What we mean by test days is every play outside of your indie period should be a test. For example, during your team period, you want to script out everything. On defense, you want to put your base look against every one of their top plays and formations. And on offense, you want to make sure that you can run your top 3 run plays against their top defensive fronts. And of course, your top pass plays against their top 3 coverages. Now, what's the best way to organize all of this? We recommend you create a box on your practice sheet that each coach can look at and coach the player that will have a direct impact on the play. So for example, if you're running power to the right, every coach should be looking at their position to the play side and determine what adjustments need to be made during that play. On defense, it's the same thing, but all coaches should be looking at the play side attack to make sure every gap is filled by the appropriate player and make sure the gap is filled by every appropriate player on run plays. And on pass plays, just making sure the coverage is airtight. If the scout team gashes you, there's a good chance the team on Friday is probably going to gash you as well. So this is where you patch up any holes, but you already have everything scripted out. So you'll know exactly where all these holes are. We call these test days because Tuesdays and Wednesdays are the days you want to experiment before putting a bow on everything on Thursday. Now, what do Thursdays typically look like? Well, most coaches will use Thursdays as a true walkthrough day where they're walking through game situations and personnel. While this isn't a bad approach, we can add some gasoline on top of it and really make it productive. Now, most games are won and lost in situations, right? And this includes the opening script, special team situations, and down and distance situations. We want to put our players in these situations because it will help realize the best strategy when they're in them. Remember, we want to mimic the game as close as we possibly can, and Thursday is no exception. Now, we do want to add one disclaimer to Thursday practices. Do not install on Thursdays. It's one of the worst things you can do. If you're talking tips and reminders, that's a completely different story. But if we're talking about installing new plays and concepts hours before the game, your players are never going to retain it. And this will probably often lead to you pulling your hair out because they aren't executing something you taught them 18 hours before the game. Thursdays should be polish days. You want to polish your game plan, and every player should know what your move is going to be before you even make it because they're essentially little coaches on the field. Now, that takes us into Friday on game day. And what's left to do, you may ask? Well, depending on how school went for the players, teachers may have given these players tests. Maybe they were studying all night, so their mind went away from football a little bit. We got to prep these players and give them a refresher on what to expect for the game that's upcoming. Now, what's the best way to prep the players before the game? We found a short 5 to 10 meeting with your players on all of the tips and reminders are key for this period before the game. Again, you're not installing or putting anything new in. All you're doing is just going over tips and reminders. Remember, your players are probably pretty nervous and they're going to have other things on their mind. So this meeting is simply just to answer any last minute lingering questions. And at the end of the day, just make sure that the players are ready to go. Now, once you play the game, they'll wake up the next morning and hopefully you'll be able to watch film on Saturday and break down the film. That way you can go over what every player has done wrong while everything is still fresh in their mind. Now, once the players leave, preferably in the morning, you have the rest of the day. And as coaches, you know, you get right back into it. And the game planning process is the most important process and important day of the week, those Saturdays and Sundays. But oftentimes you're spent hours and hours and hours of game planning. If you want to save 4 to 5 hours on average game planning and getting all of your coaches involved with your game plan, we have a link in the description below, which we call the Victory Game Plan Lab. Again, it's going to walk you through step by step on how to save hours on game planning. That way you can get your weekends back. And you can make this game planning process as easy as possible.